Hi, everyone. Hi. Welcome to VIFF's 2017 Creator Talk series. We hope you enjoyed the episode as much as we did. We're thrilled to host creator, writer, and executive producer Simon Barry tonight to talk about his new series. Based in Vancouver, Simon is best known as the creator, showrunner of the multi-award-winning time travel series Continuum, which has been broadcast in over 100 countries worldwide. Recent television projects also include writing and directing as executive producer on Neil Labute's Van Helsing. Simon also served as writer, executive producer on the Rogers Netflix six-part limited series Band Blood. Over the last 20 years, Simon has written feature film and television projects for Warner Brothers, DreamWorks, Universal, Columbia, Working Title, SkyBound, Freeform, CBX, Fox, USA, FX, TNT, CTV, MGM, Sky, DHX, and many independent companies. Very impressive. Our host for the evening is Vancouver-based director Scott Smith. Welcome, Scott. Scott is best known... Yay! Scott is best known for directing multiple episodes of Magicians, Cedar Cove, Signed, Sealed, Delivered, and Call Me Fitz, to name but a few. His most recent credit includes the TV series Carter. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Scott to start the conversation.
These chairs always look so small. Just going to get a sense of who's in the audience tonight.
Well, I was going to say we have a couple of people from the show I'd like to acknowledge because they did great work. So I'd love to ask Luvia Peterson, Jesse Moss to stand up. Where are you guys? Come on. Elise Gadian, stand up. Yeah. Rachel Langer, who wrote on the series as well, stand up. Phil Granger, who's here, part of the cast. He's not in this episode, but he's coming up. Tammy Gillis is here as well. Anybody else I'm forgetting from the show? Just raise your hand. Oh, and yeah, Larry, yes. Stand up, Mr. Fong, please. Yes, we'll never forget him as Larry. What happened to you, Larry? You were you're at the bottom of the ocean, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many episodes were you contracted for, Larry?
Just the one.
All right, who is here not from the show? There we go. Okay.
Even better.
Who here is a writer? Maybe developing their own TV series or wanting to work on a TV series, okay. And director, maybe want to work in television. Producer, trying to produce a series. Just fan of sci-fi, fan of the show. Okay, all right, wow. A wide-ranging conversation this is going to be because you got a little bit of everything here. Well, my friend.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, how's it going, Simon? We just had this conversation outside. No, we didn't actually. We talked about Hurricane Sandy. Where did this start? You have an odd origin story, and I'm probably gonna go back and forth between Continuum a little bit because for those people who are developing their own series, Continuum is probably a more accessible model than you've been so graciously offered. But let's start with how this all started.
This is an unusual process to get into this show in particular. Normally, a writer comes up with an idea, either writes the spec pilot and sends it around, or either develops a pitch and then goes around and pitches the idea, finds the broadcaster, finds the studio, finds the money, finds the producers. That's the normal model. This was not the normal model. It's not the normal show either. This show was basically presented to me as an opportunity. I was working on Van Helsing, which is another sci-fi show. I'd been hired because Neil Labute, who's a very accomplished writer-director, was basically the showrunner on Van Helsing, but had never been a showrunner before. And so I was asked to partner with Neil to be his right hand. So I was there to help Neil through the process to basically lead, set an example for him to follow, and then I would phase myself out of the show and move into directing on Van Helsing, where I didn't have any of the responsibilities as a showrunner. I could be just a pure director. And as that was happening on Van Helsing, the network was visiting and said, well, we want to do a new show, and since you're probably not going to come back to Van Helsing, which I wasn't planning on coming back because Neil was essentially, I taught him everything I knew, and he was well on his way. I was intrigued because I figured, well, I don't have a job next year because Van Helsing doesn't want me back. So they said, we want to do a story about ghosts. And I said, great, what's the pitch? And they said, well, small town, big ghost problem, a few minor details. And I was like, okay, what else? And they were like, that's it. Come back to us with a pitch. And I was like, okay. And what if I bring you the right pitch? They go, well, we'll make the show. And I was like, that's a good answer. I will work on this.
So where do you start with something like that? It's kind of a gift to be handed.
It is. It's very unusual. It's never happened to me before. It may never happen again in that way.
Did you get to start with like what interests me about this world or about this genre? Where do you pick the place to start from?
It's a great question. It's not 100% obvious in the pilot, but the thing for me was, how do I take the concept of the paranormal, the ghost paradigm? How can I look at it from as many different points of view as possible? So I thought, well, I need a priest, I need a scientist, I need a medium, and I need a regular person, like a humanist. And then I can cover all the angles. Now, it's not in the pilot. The scientist comes in the next couple episodes, and the humanist, or as I would say, would be me, the person who doesn't believe in anything, is represented by Kim Coates, who comes in episode 2. So
is that what's the dictionary next to humanist? Is a person who doesn't?
It's Kim Coates, actually. If you go into the dictionary, look up humanist. There's a picture of Kim Coates. Yeah. No, he's a Sybarite, actually, not a humanist. He's a Sybarite. So the idea was, how can I challenge all the versions of ghost stories with a group of people who all have a different argument? And so that was how I started the pitch. I went back and I said, I think we need a. I said, I need a priest. It was like a bad joke. I need a priest, a scientist, and a medium. And but the construct of the pitch was, I'll build there's a company in the town. So this pilot introduces you to the small town. There's like a big, like a Google outpost that has decided to build their very dangerous particle accelerator in the town. That's what ultimately has caused the earthquake. And so in future episodes, you'll see a flashback to the day of the earthquake, but from the scientist's point of view.
Got you. Okay. So is it? Did you pick these 4 characters because it's like, well, let's start with belief, like where we're just going to talk with.
It was all about dogma. Yeah, I wanted a scientist who believed that ghosts were nothing more than a expression of quantum physics. I wanted a priest who wanted this to validate his belief in the supernatural elements of religion. I wanted a medium who basically had a direct line into communicating with the dead. And I wanted someone who represented just the normal person who was like, this is fucked up. I don't believe any of this until it happens to me.
So what came next? You pitched this idea, or did you go in and write the pilot?
I did a 2-page pitch of the town, the mythology of ghosts, in my version of why the ghost. So essentially the idea was we've all heard of death's door. Well, the pitch was death's door is closed. That was the pitch. The pitch was this accident, this particle accelerator is turned on, something goes wrong, and death's door closes. And so anyone who dies cannot pass through, which means they become trapped in purgatory, and the purgatory is localized to this town.
Like a bad garbage strike.
Basically. Yeah, it's a garbage strike with the dead. And the idea was that no one knows, the mystery would be essentially no one's really figured out what's happened. But it doesn't matter, because in execution, the dead being trapped creates its own self-fulfilling problems, manifests this anger, and the ghosts are sort of become animalistic because they can't do what is natural to them, which is to move on.
Gotcha, okay. So
That was the pitch. Without anything really specific to the pilot, that was just like character A, character B, character C, character D, each representing the unholy cross, and then the mythology of how these ghosts are trapped and why. And that's all the network needed at that point to say, go write the script.
just one, no writing room yet.
No, it was a pilot that ultimately was thrown out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's always fun.
Well, I wrote the pilot. I wrote the first pilot. Nobody knows this, so this will be good. This will be good. I wrote the first pilot, which has now been destroyed. No, I wrote the first pilot way after everything had happened. It was like the town has already been basically under siege for weeks. And the network was, we like some of these ideas, but we need it to be more straightforward. We need to see the town before anything happens. We need to get to know these characters. And I was like, okay, I get it. So I rewrote the pilot. But between those two pilots, we did 2-week breaking with Dennis Heaton and Jonathan Walker, who John I recruited from Continuum. Dennis, who was the executive producer on Motive, but I identified early as someone I wanted to work with because he's so twisted and into the occult and darkness and I'm not really by nature. So I needed an ally in the twisted department.
You need a guy with a flaming hand.
Yeah, I needed a guy with a flaming hand.
And a foul mouth.
Yeah. So we did a 2-week kind of reimagining.
So these are the first two people. Part of the thing that fascinates me still to this day about showrunners, creators, is that, this germ of an idea starts in their head, or starts in a conversation, or starts somewhere, whatever happens. They're alone with it. They slowly have to start sharing it with people. Like a snowball, it becomes a lot of people. But unlike a snowball, eventually that reaches its sort of peak number of people when you're shooting, 120 people on set and post and all this kind of stuff, and then it eventually shrinks back down to you, and you're sitting on the stage with somebody like me. Yeah. That's all of it. This is what we're going to try and cram
Well, it's
into
not me.
60 minutes.
I like to say it takes a village, but it takes a twisted village, a weird village, a bizarre village.
So what's the first step in taking this thing out of your brain, all that stuff, all that me time, so to speak, developing this idea, kind of coming up with your own philosophy around it, and then how do you include 2 other people in that conversation in a way that allows them to contribute, but doesn't sidetrack the work you've done in the last month and a half thinking about it?
Well, because it had been presented to me as an opportunity, there was no normal preciousness. I wasn't precious about it because it wasn't
your special idea. Yeah, okay.
It wasn't something I had labored over in a vacuum. Like most of the ideas, you develop, you try and find a way to bring it out into the world and put it in the light. This was really an opportunity that was, here's what we want. Can you come up with a solution to it? So I was in problem-solving mode from day one, which meant your ego was, you could leave your ego away because it was really just, how am I going to close this deal? How am I going to make this work? And for me, it was easier to bring in every other idea available because I didn't really assume it was my idea ever. It was never really mine. So when it's not yours, and it still isn't mine, it's much easier to hand it out and say, let's all figure out a way to make this happen. Because the reward is, hey, we get to make another TV series in Vancouver. And that means 150 people get jobs, and that you can hire your friends and make money and play. So it was very detached from me from day one. Other than I was the ringleader. I was like the conductor. I wasn't really it wasn't my precious idea that I've been, developing and toiling over. It was more like, oh, here's something we can do as a bunch of people.
So how much time did you get in the writing room then, before going to camera? I know it was pretty short.
Yeah, it was a short room. So we did 6 weeks of breaking and outlining. Then we took 4 weeks off, 3 or 4 weeks, Rachel? 3 weeks off to write. So we had 6 writers in the room. We all got scripts. So the pilot was written at that point. So actually, I think only 5 scripts were written so we did scripts 2 to 6 during the 3-week break. Then we all got back into the room for another 4 weeks. And then we broke the last, what was it? So we did 6 plus 7. So we did the first, we sort of soft broke the whole season though, really, in the first 6 weeks.
Well, let's go back to that then, because I think the writing room is one of the great mysteries for most people, I think. Because you have to do so much in such a short period of time, and I think everybody's got a slightly different approach to that.
I don't know anyone else's approach. I only know
and
mine.
it's kind of like directors. You never actually get access to anybody else, so it develops in its own kind of vacuum. But at the end of the day, I would say, well, look, they've got 600 pages to write.
Yeah,
in these 3 months.
It's daunting, but
So how do you start?
You start with a conversation. You really just, the first weeks, I love the first 2 weeks of a writer's room because there's no obligation to write anything. It's just, let's all have a conversation, and hopefully someone who's taking the notes doesn't miss anything. Because if they do, it's gone. It's lost.
And are you looking for big beats? Are you building the world or the rules?
Well,
around? There's a lot of rules around.
My
ghosts
job is to set goals, so I like to go into the room and go, here's our goal. Here are our goals. Here's what I would like to accomplish in week 1 and in week 2. And then I sort of open it up to this very loose, random discussion of what show everyone wants to make, but within the constraints of our budget, our schedule, and what the network expects.
So, given all that, what were some of the big aha moments of that, or of those early days? In hindsight, were like real building blocks of the show.
Yeah, I think just I think I kind of knew that we had to build a affordable box of storytelling because we had a very low budget on this show. This show was less than $2 million US an episode, which is half the budget of Arrow or Flash. So we couldn't, but we had stars like Vincent D'Onofrio and Kim Coates who are expensive. So we had to find this place where the characters became the special effects. And the ghosts would be this thing we would hold off on and not be trying to make an action show about ghosts. We were trying to make a show about people, and the ghosts were the catalysts for those people's relationship with each other. And that was pretty clear to me just because I have a very, I have a intimate relationship with the money, and I'm the conduit to the money. So when I come into the room, I don't want the writers worrying about money. I worry about the money, and then I allow the writers to do whatever they want, and I kind of control it and shape it so that I know we can afford it. So I think we really just built on really great character, hopefully great. They may not be, but
No spoilers.
ask me in January when it's on Netflix. And they're all out at the same time. So the goal was, how can we make the show's engine about the people, not the special effects? And the goal was to find the dynamics of character relationship in this situation that felt like everyone, it was interesting, really.
Did that lead directly to 6 big beats for each character kind of thing? Is that the next?
We set up goalposts. So we identified who are our key character components, key characters, what made them them, and where we were hoping they would end up by the end of the season, either having evolved or changed, surprised in their decision making, or had a logical conclusion to whatever was the anchor to their character. It wasn't clear to anybody. We were winging it for sure, but we knew that if we didn't succeed in making the show about the people, we were lost because we just couldn't sustain a show that was action driven and special effects driven all the way through. We knew we could use those elements to make that better, but we had to make the ending of the season. And that's kind of what you do in the first few weeks. You go, here, who's the star of the show? Who's the character we want to care about? where are they going to end up, and how can we surprise the audience about where they end up and why? But at the same time, they'll be surprised, but in the back of their mind, they'll go, oh, no, of course, that's exactly what they would have done.
It was inevitable. Yeah.
It was inevitable. So we're not trying to pull the rug out from anyone. We're just trying to say, we've been telling you all along what's going to happen. You just didn't want to see it until it happened. And then when it does happen, you go, oh, yeah, of course that was going to happen. And that's the stakes. The stakes are, what is this person going to do?
Do you find in the writer's room that writers take characters, or even temporarily as a group, or do you all work together as a group on all the characters equally? How does that just kind of naturally fold out as a
In the first 2 weeks, we're all sharing everything. So everyone owns, I think, everything. I think we all come to this. There is a place where we all look at each other and go, this is what we want to do, right? And everyone either nods or somebody stands up and goes, but what about this? And you get
literally stand up?
No. They'll throw things, though.
Because that would be really funny. Like
there will be throwing. There will be objects will be thrown.
Yes,
no, there is healthy debate. I mean, that's actually my job, is to encourage healthy debate. You never want me. I never want to be the person that just doesn't get anyone challenging the status quo. You want people who passionately articulate their defense of an idea, always. It doesn't mean they have to win the argument. It just means that we all listen, and then based on that argument, we reevaluate what we think we're doing. And that's why the room is so interesting, because sometimes the worst idea is the conversation that gets you to the best idea. So someone will pitch, oh, this character should do this, and we'll all go, that's fucking stupid. Why would you pitch that? And they're like, I know, it was dumb. I'm still hungover from last night. And then that sparks a conversation about a subject we would never have organically come up with in the room, that then leads to a genius idea that we all go, oh my God, this is exactly what the show should be at this point. That's the part I can't explain. All I can do is create the environment where that can happen, but I can't come up with the ideas myself.
So besides being a good writer, what makes a good writing room participant?
Well, you can't be shy.
Okay.
It's very frustrating when I know someone has good ideas and they don't share. It's the hardest. It makes me feel like someone has come to the casino with all this money and they're not going to gamble any of it.
It's so funny because almost every writer I know is really shy.
Yeah, it's actually.
But I guess amongst other writers.
No, but it's good. But the writer's room is supposed to be a safe space. It's supposed to be a place where you can be. There are no recriminations. I mean, this is my room. I don't know about other rooms, but in my room, no one gets. You're never diminished or disciplined for speaking out or having a terrible idea, because bad ideas lead to interesting conversations.
Yeah, it looks like that improv thing. No blocking.
Yeah, you just want to create space for someone to, and also you want different perspectives. So a diverse room is a key. The last thing I want is another Simon Barry in the room. In a way, I don't want someone who's solving problems the way I do. I want 5 other people who solve problems in a different way, so that we all benefit off of their process, and that's what usually makes for a great room. This was I thought, one of the best rooms I've worked in, because, number one, everyone's from Vancouver, which was a first for me, which was great. But number 2, we knew we were under the gun, and we knew that we all liked the show. So everyone was making the show they wanted to see. And it was very productive.
Yeah, what are your tips for, at that point you're co-creating something that's going to be, everybody's got a version of it in their head, but you can't trust that. That's not going to be the show in the end.
Yeah, but I did
I
ask everyone day one, I think, what's the show
in your head?
Without letting anyone know what I was thinking, I just asked everyone in the room, what's the show you want to make, or what's the show you want to show your friends? What's the show you would send to your parents? What's the show you would say, oh, I'm proud of this show? And everyone had an answer, but and all the answers were part of the whole. It was a show that just had layers, ultimately, and they had their version of which layer they wanted to express.
Is there a moment where you all know collectively as a group that, okay, we are making the same show? Like, you
Yeah,
converge on
we
that
did
moment?
have that moment, but then you go, we're crazy that no one's going to make this. That's what happens. You get excited. You figure like, oh, this is great, but that we're the insane people, and that when we present this, no one's going to want to make it.
So what was that moment? What was the thing that brought it together?
I can't remember that exact moment, honestly. Rachel might. Her brain's younger and fresher than mine.
But it does exist. It's part of that process is to
Yeah,
land
you do.
somewhere.
You do get at a certain point. I think you do go. I think when you've tracked the show's characters closely to the end point, where you go, oh yeah, this could actually be watchable, because when you first show up, you figure everything is a disaster, and you're building out of that. You're building out of
You
the
don't know where
worst
you're
show
going.
ever, and you're trying to make it not the worst show ever. It might be the worst show ever. I don't know. I haven't seen the pilot. Is it any good?
Have you seen the ending?
I have no idea how it ends.
But I get that. When you start, you're kind of going into the great unknown, maybe in 6 or 7 different directions. You don't know, and until you get to that end point, you can loop back. You probably don't know where you're going.
Yeah, you just hope. I mean,
Yeah.
we're all audience members too, so everyone in the room is challenged to be that person watching at home.
So I was shocked. I don't know how many people were here during the other panel that you were on with the showrunners on Saturday, but I was shocked when Tommy from Better Call Saul played that incredible clip, which was kind of like the season 1 defining scene between the two brothers, that it felt like the whole season was built on. And knowing the pedigree of that room, you assume this was decided months in advance that they were all heading towards that goalpost. They stumbled on this goalpost somewhere around the 8th week of production and the 5th month of their room, which is a kind of startling feat in trust and skill, I think, in the end, to actually land somewhere so perfect for the show. But how do you balance that as a showrunner to kind of walk the line between discovery and we need to bring this to the ground now to know what we're doing?
We don't have the luxury of that time frame that they do. On Better Call Saul, they're breaking stories and writing half a year before production. We're writing 3 months, if we're lucky, before production, and
Still don't have everything
they're writing through the shooting. We try to have all our scripts done before we start shooting, as many as we can. So we can't really adjust as quickly, but certain things do make you adjust, like the cast. So when we wrote for 2.5 months, we didn't know Vincent D'Onofrio was going to be the priest.
Yeah.
We liked the idea that the priest was an interesting character, but then you hear, oh, Vincent D'Onofrio signed. It changes the way you start thinking about him, and you're like, oh, we need more more scenes with the priest. That's your first thought. It's
This is my next question about
we need more priest scenes, so we got to make this character a much bigger deal.
Was he the first actor that was cast?
No, Kim
was.
Kim was cast. Then I think Vincent actually was the last major part we would cast. Yeah, Kristen Lehman, Candace, Kim, Avon, and Luvia, and then Vincent, I think, was probably our last big decision.
Okay, so how did that change this thing that's in the air is now? The cast tends to bring that stuff to the ground pretty quick.
Well, it's funny, the realities of casting. This is a little inside baseball, but so forgive me. But when you cast an actor like Vincent D'Onofrio, who is incredibly expensive, you realize we can only afford him for a certain number of episodes. So we, as a room, had to reevaluate what we had done with the priest character, Father Dan, which was never, in our minds, Vincent, and realize we can only afford him for less. We had 13 episodes, and we couldn't afford 13 episodes. So we had to figure out how to make that work. So immediately you're rewriting your season to accommodate the financial constraints of what an actor costs.
This is one of these great boundaries that create all.
They don't teach you that
solutions,
in
no.
writing school, that you have to do that. But we had to basically go, okay, he's going to be in less episodes than we hoped or wanted or wrote at that point. What do we do? How do we make it work?
Okay, so by this time you've got cast landing, you've got a writer's room typing away, you've got network executives who are calling in on outlines first. You send them 13
Yeah,
outlines?
we sent Syfy. So the relationship with Syfy and Netflix, Netflix never gave us a note ever, except once in the editing process. Syfy.
Which is actually even more impressive because it proves they're actually watching.
I don't think they know we exist. Actually, we may be on Netflix, and the people at Netflix will be like, "Did we make this show? I didn't know we did that."
It'll say Netflix original.
No,
question mark.
it'll be very. I wouldn't be surprised. So, but Syfy was very much involved in the noting process in the outlines, but still to a very low degree, because for them we were in the what I would call the ghetto of their production schedule. Low money, low expectations. So they really weren't paying much attention.
Plus, to your credit, this is your third show with them, so they know you. Like
I don't think it was that. I just think we had bigger fish to fry.
Fish to fry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for saying that.
What were they?
though.
Well, I know. I know
I'm their ghetto guy. No, I'm the go-to. If it's low budget, it shoots in Vancouver. Yeah, I know the
Go-to
guy.
and ghetto
Let's
are
call
kind of-
Simon to do it.
But I do know that studios and networks, because they have so much to do, like, it's you tend to see them working with the same people for a reason. Like, it's a relationship, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of notes,
It
it's
helps.
a lot of dailies, it's
It
a lot
helps,
of scripts,
yeah.
a lot of
No,
conversations.
it certainly helps if they trust you
Yeah.
to execute. They won't babysit you as much as if you're new.
What was if you can say, what was the central tenor of their notes? Like, what was the show that they wanted to make sure was being
I think they
made?
just wanted clarity. They really wanted clarity in what was happening and what the rules of the ghosts were.
Oh, interesting.
They wanted to make sure that the audience was never fed contradictory information, or they didn't mind mystery, which was great, but they just wanted to make sure that we knew what we were, that we had a track. And sometimes you kind of pretend you do,
Yeah,
even though you
they
don't.
kind of back you up.
I mean, they ask you early on, do you know how this is going to play out? And you go, yeah, we know how this is going to play out. We got it all figured out. And you look around, I'm doing this on a conference call, and all the writers are in the room, and we're like,
And they don't say, well, pitch to us right now.
hope they don't ask us to pitch them right now, because we don't. But I think it's like a confidence game. They want to believe that you believe and that you've got it all under control.
What
And
was
really,
your-
it's just like management. If you own a chain of stores and you have 10 people managing those stores, you just want to know that each manager in those individual 10 stores has got it handled.
Yeah.
And then your job is so much easier. You can focus on your tea times or whatever it is you do as an executive. And I'm ultimately I'm just one of the I'm just one of the store managers on many of their shows, and they just want to believe that everything's taken, that they don't have to worry, and they can have their golf game without a phone call, I think.
How did you define the rules of the ghosts? I noticed you can physically entangle with them, but a bullet won't stop. Or how do you figure all that out? That's
Yeah,
a good point.
we debated it internally a lot. We wanted Maggie to be, well, we divided the ghosts into two forms. There was the ghosts that were what we called like the legacy ghosts. People who had died who had chosen to stay behind, like Maggie. She had a choice, and she chose not to move on, to stay behind, to be, well, as you'll discover, she wants to be close to her father, who's disturbed. And there's other ghosts like Maggie in the show that will present, that are introduced later on. And those are the ghosts that Roman has always seen, like his friend when he was a kid, and sort of the people that he has had a relationship with that is not of his choosing. Then there's the new ghosts, who are the ghosts who have died since death's door closed, who manifest in a different way.
Oh, and they all have different rules, different abilities?
It's not about the abilities. It's really about they're just aggressive, so they use the abilities that essentially all the ghosts have, but choose either to use or not use. And these ghosts would rather have more joining their ranks. So by pushing people to hurt themselves, hurt other people, they're essentially, lashing out.
Gotcha, different motives. Yeah, okay.
Well, those become clearer later on.
Is that something you had to build as you went, or is that something you had to build before you went?
A bit of both. We had an idea about how it would work in the room, and then when you start shooting, you make slight adjustments because you realize, oh, some of the things we thought we could pull off, we can't, or some of the things we want to pull off, we can. So let's lean into these things we can do, but stay away from the things we can't do.
That's a term I've actually working on a lot of first-year series now, and that's probably the most commonly used term in the kind of finding of a show is that we'll lean into that. It's like these little lily pads that you find that have support. You know, it's like climbing a rock wall or something like that. It's like, you know, if it works for the show, lean into it. If it's a limitation that keeps coming back, we lean into it.
It's a very
kind of
appropriate. It's a very appropriate approach to filmmaking. So, and a great example is I'll use Jesse Moss as an example. So, when we started writing the show, Jesse, who plays Detective Norm, we hadn't really planned out an arc for Norm. You know, we knew Norm was going to be integral to the storytelling because the sheriff was dead, and here's this deputy who's kind of been thrust into a role that he didn't plan on and clearly isn't prepared for. But once we got to know Jesse and see his work, and realized, oh, this guy's really good, we had to start thinking we need to exploit this actor. Like, that's a lean-in situation where, as writers, we go, this guy's amazing. Let's start building an arc for this character that leads to a very different story than we had when we left the room originally. That's a good lean-in scenario. And you can do the opposite. You can have an actor who you go, oh my God, this isn't really working out the way we imagined it. Let's diminish it or change it.
They die.
Yeah, or they die. Yeah, we didn't do that. But that's a good, I think that's a metaphorical version of a lot of things that happen on a set. So it can be a location, it can be a relationship. A lot of things come to life in the production that you don't imagine will play out in positive and negative ways, and you make adjustments as you go because you have to, because you always are trying to put your best foot forward.
Yeah, it can be a strong Steadicam operator. Suddenly,
It can be anything. It can be someone on the crew. It can be. It's really a mystery until you are deep into it and you realize, okay, this is what we have. This is our strengths. These are our weaknesses. Let's play to our strengths, and you do.
Okay, so as a director, I've always found it pretty fascinating that the showrunner who creates the show, and whether or not however they refer to the baby, they are responsible for the baby. They may share the baby. They may be very, very gracious with the baby. They may credit all kinds of people with helping father the baby or mother the baby, but they are responsible for that baby. And the only time in the whole process, from prep to post, that they have to give up the baby for about 7 days or 10 days or however long you have to shoot is to the director, who gets the baby for that period of time and then gives it back, which is a really interesting and tricky, I imagine, and then multiple directors in a kind of an ongoing chain after that. So when it comes to doing a pilot, you're actually taking from just paper to the screen with somebody you've chosen to take that baby and help do it, of course in consultation with the DP and the designer and yourself. But how do you start that process? What do you look for in choosing a pilot
It's a great question. I didn't get to choose the director of Ghost Wars.
No. This is what networks are saying.
I had a different person in mind.
Okay.
And yeah, actually, I did talk to you about it. No, I did have another director in mind who ultimately was the producers, the people who actually were raising the money for the show, had another person that they wanted, and so I had this, and immediately it's awkward, right? Because it's like, well, you're not my first choice, but I have to work with you, so I'm going to work with you.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
And I didn't know this person. I never met them. I had no bias actually, other than it wasn't my first choice, which is fine. I'm fine with that. I was open to someone who is absolutely qualified, absolutely capable.
This was somebody they'd worked with before? And
someone they'd worked with before, David Von Enken, who had done Hell on Wheels for them, and who was kind of a big deal. His name actually meant that the people who were financing the show were much more relaxed, because I made them nervous, so they needed an adult. So he was, and someone who was very, very kind of experienced, opinionated, had his way, and which, in a weird way, in a pilot situation, is a good thing to have, because a pilot is this undiscovered thing. I like to think that I know what it is, but I don't. Everything comes together so quickly, and the cast and the chemistry of the people making it, the script, it can be 10 different things very quickly. So you do want someone who has a very specific point of view. And in David, we had someone who was very clear about what he wanted. So my job with someone like that was say, I'm going to give you a set of rules. And here are the rules. And here's the constraints that I would like you to work within in the show. So number one was the look. We have a very specific look of the show, which was, I told David, we want this to be a show where the camera doesn't have to move a lot, where we used a stills photographer, a well-known American photographer named William Eccleston as a guide. Okay. And William Eccleston is known as someone who goes to like the poorest parts of America and finds beauty and stories in the ugliness and the decrepitude and the kind of the white trashiness of certain places. And in his stills, there's a very kind of evocative beauty, which is very human. It's all about the human relationship. And so with David and the DP, Tom Burston, who I'd been working with prior to working with the director, we sort of ganged up on him, but in a good way, and said, hey, here's what we're thinking. A lot of static frames, this wide angle perspective, the 2.40 to 1 aspect ratio, which is what we see mostly in movies, not in TV.
Yeah. The network was fine with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And you can't do a lot of dolly shots. The odd dolly shot is fine, but really we want to sort of have these very kind of static proscenium frames.
Did that come from something beyond language that you got from these photographs? Where do you think?
Well, early on, before the director was hired, I had the DP. Tom had been hired. So Tom and I were he lives in New Zealand, so we were doing a long-distance correspondence for a couple of weeks where we were discussing what we both liked about cinema and horror in general. And I'd said to him, I was a big fan of The Shining, and I liked movies from the 80s like The Changeling, and this kind of old school horror where it wasn't about the gimmicks, it was about investment in emotion and things like that. And he jumped on board with that, and he was like, oh, I love that. There's this Belgian show called Hotel Beau Séjour you should watch. I said, okay, great. So my wife, Jackie, and we sat down and we watched a season almost of Hotel Beau Séjour, which was this very static, very monochromatic kind of, it was a really interesting show. And it kind of validated what I had been talking to Tom Burston about, which was this very kind of static approach to framing and storytelling. So when I met with David Von Anken, we said, Tom and I were now a unified team. We said, this is what we're thinking of. And there were a couple of reasons behind this too. The first of which was, when you don't have a lot of money, you need to set a style of your show. And most things that you want to do that stylistically set your show apart are expensive. Crane shots and drones and things that are dynamic are inherently expensive. They take a lot more time too. So I said, let's use something that's inexpensive and actually lets us make the show cheaper. And we have to own it, which means fewer camera setups, shorter days, more interesting frames. It may work, it may not. Let's see. But it was a way to make the show look different from everything else on TV without spending money.
What was David's response?
He was all over. He was into it.
Wait,
so he folded his style into that.
What was that, do you think?
Well, every director brings their comfort zone.
Yeah.
right? Every director, especially in a short schedule, we have a low budget and a short number of days to shoot. So every director feels like they have an obligation to complete the day's work, but within the parameters they're given financially and on the clock. So David had to feel like he was delivering the material that I could then later craft, but at the same time be specific enough. So there were risks that were taken that were, what some directors would say were dangerous because there wasn't a lot of coverage. And then there were certain things he did that were protecting, the opportunity to change it later. And it was that balance.
What was the conversation you had that led to this is the show we're co-creating?
It's funny because you don't know what the strengths of the show are until it's too late.
It's happening in front of you, really.
Yeah. I would say personally, I didn't know what the show was until episode 4 or 5.
This is the dirty little secret. The audience gives you it takes about 6 episodes, I think, to find the show.
Yeah, I think in episode 2 and 3, I had a glimpse of like, oh yeah, we should be highlighting these things, and especially when Kim Coates came into the show and his energy. But I don't think it was until really episode 5 or 6 that I was like, or actually it wasn't 5 or 6 because we had to shoot 5 late. It was episode 6, which we shot ahead of 5. That's a whole other story. Where I was like, that's the show. This is the show I had in my head the whole time. And that was a different director.
Yeah, he's long gone by now.
He's long gone. But we could the advantage was I could go back into the cut of the pilot and highlight the things I had liked in later episodes and play those beats in a more kind of give them an underline. And that's kind of the crazy part about this job is when it's a new show, the show reveals itself as you're making it, which is terrifying and exhilarating at the same time.
Do you watch dailies? Do you have time to watch? I should say this. Do you have time to watch dailies?
I used to watch dailies a lot. When I spend time on set, I don't watch dailies because I'm seeing it happen in front of me, so there's no reason to rewatch something I just saw. And on the pilot, I was there every day, so I didn't have to rewatch what was shot because I was already in my head. As the show starts to find its place, I stop watching dailies for the most part because I want to be more of a viewer when the cut comes out.
So how long after you started shooting did you get the first cut?
Unusually, David asked me to come in before he's finished. Okay, he said, I need to know if I'm in the right ballpark here.
Was he bringing in music and the full look and feel kind of thing?
A little bit of temp music.
Did you have to pitch that to the studio beforehand or kind of a take on the look and feel of the show?
No, they let me do, as far as the aspect ratio, the color saturation, the music, no interference.
No documentary?
No pushback, nothing.
Wow, okay.
They were just like, yeah, well, did they like it? Yeah, great.
We should all be working for Syfy.
Asleep at
or we should all be working for Syfy.
Asleep at the switch, I think. In the best way.
So by the time you get that first cut, the writing room's still open. You're still writing the last 4?
Yeah, we had well, the room was diminished. We'd released some of the writers, but we were still kind of operating as I guess it was a 4-person room after starting with 6.
You're still shooting. You've just started shooting.
Yeah.
You're now getting cuts in.
Yeah.
How are you managing your time? How do
Me?
You, yeah.
I'm prepping.
I know you're somebody who also goes home at 7. Kind of.
Well, I try to make it home every day at 7 because I hired the right people. That's the goal is, if you hire the right people, you should be able to go home at 7 because the director, the team, the producer, everyone is doing their job so well that they don't need me to tell them what to do. I should be able to go home. But my primary job after the pilot is to prep the next director and the next director and the next director and the next director. So ideally, if I'm doing my job well, I don't have to be on set again. If I am, it's out of curiosity or because it's an important scene for the show.
And how do you how do you pass the baton from one director to the next and keep them in the corridor of the show you're only now just starting to see for yourself?
you have to just bring them into this vision as you're changing it and go, let's watch the pilot together. So we watch the pilot and we go, what did you like? What did you not like? How can we improve on this? What's based on the script you have? What do you want to do? And just be basically open to a good director's vision of what they thought the show should be. Because in their idea of what the show should be, you may find a better show every time, and it just builds. So literally I learned from each director, from David to Leslie Hope to Kristen Lehman to Matthias Herndl. Every director brought a different perspective that made the show more interesting to me. So I was just basically trying to highlight the things that they were doing that I liked and pass that on to the next person and say, so for example, when Leslie was done, I was showing Matthias Herndl Leslie's cuts, going, I love this scene. This is great. Do more of that. And then when Matthias was done, I was showing his cuts to Michael Nankin and Jason Priestley and going, this is the shit. Do some more of that. And then everyone kind of stepped up, and by then they knew what was working. So, and who in the cast was, delivering, and which storylines were working great.
So if the definition of a good pilot director is to have a strong take, run with it in some direction, give you what they think is the best version of the show as a starting mark, what to you as a showrunner is the mark of a good episodic director? What do you appreciate from them? What do you want from them? I
want them to listen to everything I say and then ignore me completely and do their own thing. It doesn't make sense, but there is a logic in there. And it's like a musician. Yeah, I can write the music for them, but I want them to perform it the way they are uniquely able to perform it. And that's the intangible X factor of what people who are artists always do. They bring the same thing, but they do it in their own way that makes it interesting. And from my perspective, I don't think anything I'm doing is interesting, so I'm hoping that they make it interesting, because that's just the default setting from our perspective. It's like, oh, the show is a disaster, it's never going to work, please save us. And then this new, fresh person comes in who can save you, and you just hope that they do. And it's nice because they come into the show not jaded by anything, not polluted by the politics of the production or anything. They're exhilarated by the opportunity, and that energy translates to things that you can't write in the script. You can't tell them in prep. They just bring it with them because it's their moment to do something.
I've never actually thought.
And they get re-excited. They re-excite you about something you're kind of bogged down a little bit in.
It's actually a rare treat with episodic directing. Your objectivity becomes really valuable, and it's something you lose almost instantly if you're a writer-director working in feature film or something. You're the last person to be objective. You're asking everybody else of that. So it's kind of the other side of the coin. Yeah. What are the terrible things that directors do to you?
They don't read the script
tell us what
properly.
To avoid. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's really frustrating when a director comes onto the floor and directs a scene for their purposes and not servicing the show. Right. And they miss a very important beat or a moment that is right there, but however it happened in the prep or in the hundreds of conversations, they either didn't listen to you. Like I've done preps where I've said to a director, and then the door opens and they see the thing, and we are like, oh my God, it's the thing. And the director shoots the scene. It's like they open the door and then they turn around and they walk away. I'm like, you were supposed to make this a big deal. Why didn't? And they're going, well, I don't remember that. Guys, we talked about this. You should have. But that happens. And you assume that just because you said it in the prep meeting or the tone meeting, that it registered. But sometimes it doesn't. And then you have to cut around it or reshoot or. rewrite in the editing room to make up for something you can never get back. That's really frustrating.
Imagine.
Yeah.
Or put a big booming piece of music in there that replace the thing.
Or something. I mean, it's a hard, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does happen, it does frustrate me, for sure. Because then I'm like, okay, now I have to go reshoot the scene, and I have to direct it, and that's, it's a hassle.
Who are your I guess protectors in that sense? Do you send your writers of each episode to set?
There's always a writer on set. Not necessarily the writer of the episode, but just someone who's in the pack. So it's either it's whoever's really available or not. Sometimes I want a writer in the prep part of the show and someone on the shooting part, so that there's always rotation.
Gotcha. Okay.
But usually there's a writer.
They don't get too buddy
No.
through prep, so they're not paying attention.
No, I like a little bit of antagonism, actually. I like writers pushing back, fighting for the show, not for their scripts. And that's why I like writers who aren't necessarily on the shows that are the ones they wrote, because you can get precious about your own work. But if you're precious about the series, the show, then you'll make cogent arguments, and logic will always win. Information will always win. And it never has to be about ego. It's never yours. It's never like, oh, I wanted it this way, or I saw it this way. It's like, no, you don't understand. The show has to do this track, because otherwise the last 4 episodes don't make sense. And you can't lose that argument, ever.
That's good advice. Does Tom, once you're up and running, does he help kind of keep everything inside the guidelines of the look of the show?
Yeah, he's always fighting.
Or is that dealt with in prep? By the time they get there, they know they're not moving the camera very
It's a
much.
battle. It's a battle. He has to fight for his version of the show and allow for the directors to present their version too. It's back and forth, which is good, because that's the space where creativity happens.
Oh, that's the one. Okay, well then, and then you have the added skill of also being a director yourself. So at the end of your season, you take off your writer's hat, you give yourself the baby. Yeah. What's you've done this a couple times now, so it's probably changing for you. But what's that like? How do you take one off, put one on? Do they inform each other? How do you, or do you leave the writer behind?
No, for me, it's like the vacation within the job. I get to go on holiday inside the show, which is great, because normally I'm constantly managing 13 hours, scripts, shots, production concerns, edits, and I don't get to dig down in a way that I would love to as a storyteller, because I'm big picture, and it's quite. It's a management exercise. It's not a creative exercise as much as you would want it to be creative. But when I direct, I have to service the scripts that are in front of me, and I have to dig down. So I love it because I get intimate with the story of the show, the individual episodes, and I get to work with the cast on a level that is kind of like a reward for me and the crew, because it's also, at the end of the season, I don't have to worry about prepping the next episodes. So there's no homework. I can just focus on the story that's being told and work in a totally different gear, which is not about managerial show running and more about just being a storyteller on another level. And because I'm kind of a phony writer, I started writing as a means to be a filmmaker, I wasn't a natural writer. So, and I come from the camera department, so I love the gear and the toys and the material that lets me, play in the sandbox of filming. That's fun for me.
How's that changed you as a writer?
I think it always changed. I think from day one, because I had a camera background, I was writing with production things, and I was always, in fact, the first movie job I got, which was for Warner Brothers, on this movie Deep Blue Sea, I remember the executive saying, well, we're going to hire you because you're not going to blow the budget, because you know how to, what it takes, what a movie costs, because you've been a cameraman. So it's invariably part of the writing. It informs my writing because I understand filmmaking, which is it's not typical, you know, but it's my way of expressing the shot, I guess.
So what advice would you, I'm sure this question will come up in some way, and we'll get to those in a second here, but for those that are staring down, you know, the dark, lonely corridor of getting something as enormous as a TV series up off the ground, what's your advice to those people?
Well, it's steps. You have to, there's all these different disciplines. So the first one is writing. Become a really good writer as a craftsman or craftsperson. Be like a carpenter. You know, you have carpenters who will make the best chairs, the best tables, the best cabinets. They work. They don't break down. They're always going to be there. You depend on them. Then there's carpenters who design elaborate, you know, sconces and they're artists. I think you have to be a straight up carpenter first and know how to do your craft, basics, 101, and then you can be, you know, creative about it. And that takes a long time, actually. I didn't think it would take me as long as it took, but I probably only felt like I knew what I was doing about 3 or 4 years ago, after writing for 20 years.
Do you think every showrunner has to be in a writing room before they're a showrunner?
No, only because I was never in a writing room before I was a showrunner.
It's a trick question.
So it's a trick question. A lot of them benefit from it for sure. A lot of writers have the staff experience to build on. There's nothing wrong. I mean, it's only going to be an advantage. I'm an anomaly because I didn't choose to be a staff writer, so I sort of held out. But then again, I had a 10-year period where I wrote and nothing ever got produced. So that's the choice you can make.
But you wrote a lot.
I wrote a lot, but I never got anything made. Whereas a staff writer in that same position would have seen their episodes being shot on a show. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, I think.
So going back to your first show, to Continuum, what do you think you had acquired or accumulated that allowed you to step into that role, and what do you wish you'd had?
Age. I think
hanging on there on the
being
line,
in my 40s, and being asked and jumping into the showrunner role helped me, because if I'd done that in my 30s, I probably would have blown it.
And what do you think it was that Syfy, was it just they loved the show and it didn't matter who was making it, you were going to be the showrunner, or they must have banked on some...
On Continuum?
Yeah.
I was mentored.
Yeah.
I had Jeff King. Jeff King, who was a very experienced showrunner, came in because they wouldn't let me showrun. And essentially, I got to hire him to be my boss/mentor. And he looked at me and said, "Dude, it's your show. Obviously, you can do this, but I'm going to make sure you don't blow it and screw up." So he coached me for the first 4 episodes or 5 episodes, and then he split.
Nice. So they assigned him to you, but you got lucky with...
Well, I got to pick him. I got to pick. They sent me, like, I think a half a dozen showrunners to meet, and he was the one I picked, mainly because I knew he was leaving. He had to go back to his other show.
This guy's got an out date.
He's got to go back to, I don't know what shoot he was doing White Collar. I was like, you have to go back to White Collar in the middle of our season? Yeah, you're hired. But he was actually the perfect mentor for me because he was great at distilling what needed to be done to make the job. So I was a very quick and intense learning process.
I can imagine.
But you need a mentor. Everyone needs a mentor.
All right, let's open it up. Do we have microphones, I think? There we go, back there.
A writer, how important is it to be accurate? Like when you were talking about the physicist, I'm assuming that not all your writers are physicists.
None of them. So accuracy is like, it's a good question. There's movie, TV accurate, and then there's real world accurate. Real world accurate is boring. No one wants to watch a TV show where real world accuracy is the replacement for information or drama. It's just boring. Honestly, you have to distill real world into a dramatic form that is ingestible.
That's my favorite Kubrick quote, actually, is, sure, it's real, but is it interesting?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not interesting, you're done, you're dead. So who cares if it's accurate at that point? I don't think it's drama. Was Shakespeare accurate ever? I mean, what is accurate at that point? I mean, it's a question of what are you trying to say, why, and the way you try and say it should be for effect as well as information. You can be accurate by saying very little. So say very little is my advice.
Unless you're doing a moon landing movie about the moon landing.
Yeah, in that case, that's the drama. Like sometimes the accuracy is the drama, so then it's okay. But most accuracy is just information, and information is, we always try to avoid too much of that.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. Congratulations for the show. I have 3 questions. My first one is, when you're writing, because you knew that you have a show, do you have actors in your mind when you're writing the characters? Even if they won't be cast, you have an image of the actors. And my second one is, how involved, once the show was accepted, you were in the casting decision? And the third one is, when you write for American show, Canadian show, I'm from Mexico, I have an accent, obviously. When you write, can you write a character like any character and be worried about having an accent or not, or that's always the network decision? How a writer can write something with an accent for other actors and fight for them?
First question is, did I have actors in mind? So the answer is yes and no. On Ghost Wars, I'd always wanted Luvia Peterson to play the mayor because I'd worked with her on Continuum, Luvia. So almost from day one, I was writing for Luvia for that part. And then I just had to figure out a way to trick the network into seeing that she was the only person who could play it. So that's me being a bit of a con artist, because I only asked, I made sure she did the best audition, and they didn't have a choice. And so that's one case where I got to pick someone I wanted to work with again. And then I'm involved in every casting decision. I present, basically the way casting works is the parts are sent to the casting director, the actors come in, and then my job is to present 1, 2, or 3 choices to the network. If I want somebody who I really want, I don't present very many choices. I'll present 1 or 2, or I'll present 1 and someone who may not be great, but I'm banking on won't be picked. Or I'll legitimately find 2 actors who are fantastic and happily go with either 1 or 3. Just depends. And then for the writing part, we didn't really have the luxury of knowing anybody until we'd written the first, after we'd written the first 6 scripts. We didn't know anyone in the cast at all. So, I mean, I talked to the writing room about prototypes, but we didn't have any confirmation. So it's really, you try and build a great character first, and then you hope that a great actor wants to play the part. And that's actually good advice. Don't write for actors if you don't have to, in terms of the core of who that person is, that character, should be bigger than any actor. Should be more obvious than any actor, because that's what the actor's actually attracted to. They're attracted to the fact that it's not them. So getting Vincent, for example, he had never played a priest who had a crisis of confidence, so that was for him a really important component to signing on, which if we had known it was Vincent ahead of time, we might have radically changed that character. I don't know. And accents are great. I love accents. I think depending on where the show is coming from, an accent will be typically either non-issue because it's about the cast, or the actor, or it's something that's been written explicitly for someone who is supposed to be not from where everybody else is, and therefore it's flavor. So it's a big question. It's hard to answer it specifically.
If I can add too, that it's now finally we have arrived at the time where the corporate world, including the networks and studios, the push for diversity is real. So they actually are eagerly accepting those kinds of offerings. Something a little left field choice. We didn't think of this person this way, but this actor came in and it changes it and provides more diversity for the cast. Everybody. The only accent I hear about is the Canadian accent. That's the one the Americans want to quash. Just want to get rid of that Canadian accent.
Next question.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering, because you were talking about adjusting the scripts to the cast once production had already begun, and I was wondering what kind of restrictions there would be on that. Like, I'm guessing you can't introduce a whole new location to the script and just be like, oh, make this work. So, like, how can you add to the character's arc or whatever and keep in mind some restrictions? Like, what kind of things would you have to keep in mind?
Yeah, you don't try to change the DNA of the show. You don't try and change what's already happening, but you can take, for example, one character that you may have decided this character is going to do all these things through the season. And then you go, oh, maybe it'd be better if we did this with 2 characters instead of 1. So you create a new character that's going to share the work of that one character instead of having it just be on one character's perspective. That's more, I think that's a better example of, for example, adding a character, or you take it and act, like we had on Ghost Wars, we had one situation where an actor we had planned to do these 13 episode storyline. In the middle of the season, we decided, hey, what if instead of it happening to this character, it happened to this character instead? So we flipped them at a point where in the middle of the season where what we had written stayed the same, but it just happened to a different character instead. That's something you can do before it's committed to film. So these are small moves. You know, they're not big changes to the story or to the core group. So you don't really think about changing locations and things like that. It's really more who's going to carry this story. Every actor, every character kind of has a responsibility for part of the story. The story is broken down into all these parts, and we actually track the season. We'll do a board where we have 1 to 13, and we do the story of each episode, and then we do another board which is each character, and we track the story through each character. So we know each character is actually owning a part of that story individually and moving the story forward. Thanks.
Next. The mayor.
Hello, Simon.
Hello.
My question for you is, are people now going, let's work with Simon Barry. He works in Vancouver. Let's do that because they want to come here and they want to work with you? Or like, are you fighting to keep stuff here? Is that something that you're interested in? Is that where you want to, you'd want to be the guy that works in Vancouver? Or can it be something like, let's work with Simon. Hey, Simon, we want to work, in South Africa, or we want to do this show here. And you're like, no, let's keep it in Vancouver. Like, are those conversations happening? And how are you getting me more work?
No. No, it's not really like that. I mean, there are opportunities for me in other places for sure, and a lot of them I say no to just because it is in other places. So, but it's mitigated by the fact that I know I can work here. So, it helps if the show is shooting here for sure. That's not to say that I've written shows that can't shoot here. It would be impossible to shoot them here. So if they go, I would go where they need to go to shoot. But in the meantime, if the opportunity presents itself to do something interesting, and knowing that Vancouver is a destination anyway, and I can argue for it shooting here, then it makes sense to do that, just so I can work with you. And that's really the only reason.
The only people pulling shows away from Vancouver when the dollar is under 80 cents are lead actors.
Right.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
They want to shoot here.
So some actors will not shoot
Yeah,
here.
there's a certain point where actors go, I got a family, I'm here 10 months of the year, I don't want to be here anymore, and that's what pulls the shows back. That's essentially the only thing I've heard of in the last 5 years anyway.
All right, guys, thank you. Oh, we have another question. We'll make this the last one because I'm
You fading?
fading. It's
Hey,
late.
guys.
It's past my bedtime.
Congrats again on the show.
Thanks.
I'm just interested in knowing what your writer's room actually physically looks like. You were talking about how you track the spines of all the characters in the show, and what methodology do you actually use? to
So
do
here's
that?
here's the rule for writer's room. Great question. You need a room with a big table in it, like a table that you could do a dinner party for 8, because you need enough room for everybody to spread out and have their laptops and their coffee cups and their takeout lunches and all this shit. You need a room where you have enough wall space that you can put up these giant Donna Cotta boards. I don't know if everyone knows what Donna Cotta is. It's like drywall, but it's bendy. And you can bring them in from Staples, and they stand up against the wall, and you can put push pins in them with index cards. And you usually need enough wall space to have, ideally, 13 of those, plus 2 or 3 more for things like character breakdowns and other random thoughts. Mostly we can't find room for 13, so we'll do 6 or 7, and then we'll flip the boards around and do the other episodes on the back sides. And then you need a fridge. You need an area for snacks, hopefully some natural light. You need it to be away from the other part of the production office so that people aren't just hanging out and walking by and dropping in. It needs to be somewhat remote, hidden. It needs to feel like you can have a Nerf fight in there, like with Nerf guns and drones, or it just has to feel like your play area and your thinking space, and you need to have comfortable chairs.
So heavily padded is what you're saying.
Padded room. Yeah, I mean it's like it's like the perfect brainstorming place where you can you can close the door and you can make noise and you can laugh. There's a lot of laughter. I mean, we laugh all day long. So I feel bad for the person who's in the next office, because they're just going to hear these people laughing all day long, and they're going to look at the budget and go, we're paying these people this much for laughter? This is screwed up. So you hope that you're away from the people who actually have really hard jobs to do and don't get to laugh all day, because it's awkward. But we make a lot of noise. We scream and yell and we swear, and you need a video screen to play movies, and no sharp edges.
All right, well, I'd like
Thank
to
you.
thank Simon Barry. We look forward to the next 12 episodes.
Thanks everyone for coming
Thank
out.
you guys all for coming out. Enjoy the rest of your festival.
And for those of you, it'll be available on Netflix in January, I think.
Oh, that's right. Now we have to wait.
Yeah, or you can get it on the Pirate Bay, apparently. It's readily available. Thank you again for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. And thanks for the cast.